Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just another minute as more people sign in. Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome and welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay Rosen. Here at Cafe Oleh with Nefesh B'Nefesh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need here in Israel to succeed, whether that's reading and paying your bills, going grocery shopping and reading nutritional labels, keeping up with the news, striking up a conversation, job interviewing, dating, flirting, complaining, all the everyday things you do in your native language, in your country of origin, but here in Israel in modern Hebrew. As always, we want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. You can always be in touch with us by email at hebrew@nbn.org.il. If you're joining us live on Zoom, you can write to us in the chat with any questions, comments, concerns, and topic requests you may have. You can also see all of our previous lessons up on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Oleh. You'll see a playlist link of all of our previous lessons, over 170 past lessons, over 30,000 views. You can not only subscribe to our list there so you can get all the latest lessons and review all the previous ones, but also drop us a comment in the description where you'll also get a copy of the spreadsheets and other materials that we pass out with these. And final little bit of housekeeping. If you're joining us live on Zoom, remember that we use the Q&A for questions concerning the specific class we're about to start. Everything else not related to this class or other questions, comments, concerns in the chat, and we just ask you to keep the personal chat to a minimum. With that, let's get started. So today is a topic we do at least once every 4 to 6 weeks, which I call media literacy. It's best understood as how to read the news like a local Israeli, which is to say a couple things. Many of us are learning Hebrew. You're joining me, you're joining each other tonight to learn Hebrew for a specific reason. It's not just to learn a language, it's not just to learn any language. It's to learn modern Hebrew so as to make aliyah and or to further fit in or at least understand Israeli society, right? And when you have a practical application of learning a language like that, it necessitates, right, knowing how to use the language in everyday circumstances. And with all due respect to all the different language tools that are out there. And in a few weeks, actually at the end of our summer session, we're going to go over some really invaluable resources online and in print to help you with your Hebrew. Um, some of them are not made for everyday life. The classic one is a certain app on people's phone. I won't say its name, may begin with the letter D, and is notorious for having very random questions and sentences for you to translate in one way or another. And it's true also for the Hebrew class, by the way, which is why we really try to ground it in everyday life. And so the media literacy one, I think, is one of the most important classes we do, and which is why we do it very frequent, which is to say, news happens fast in Israel. To paraphrase a certain 1980s film, life comes at you really fast, especially fast in Israel. And it's important to keep up with the news. Anyone who's lived here in the last year and a half knows that, knows all the different ways to be in touch with regards to news, developing news, whether it's a notification on your phone or where they check for the latest information. And because this country's majority of inhabitants speak Hebrew, most of the information, the most updated information will always be in Hebrew. That's just an absolute fact. You can complain as much as you want about why aren't there more English resources in Israel. Folks, unless 100,000 people, God willing, are making Aliyah tomorrow from North America, it just ain't going to happen. The vast majority of citizens in the state of Israel speak Hebrew as their first language, some of them only language. If that's jarring for those of you who only speak English, keep that in mind. A little bit of humility when we learn languages is very important. 20% of the population is Arab, so they speak Arabic and Hebrew, not to mention all sorts of other languages spoken by people in this country coming from all around the world, which is to say the common denominator will always be Hebrew. That is not just the state official language of Israel, that is the official language of the Jewish people for the last 4,000 years. That is our past, present, and that is absolutely our future. To demand anything less, that's just wrong. So that necessitates knowing how to stay up with the news as developing as it changes all the time in Hebrew. So, for example, about 7 minutes ago here in Israel began the nightly newscasts on all four major stations in Israel, all major stations, the public broadcaster and the three main commercial networks, right? They all begin at the same time, as opposed to other countries. They may be staggered. The main news starts at 8 o'clock at night, sometimes a few minutes before. And that's where the vast majority of news of Israelis get their news. Yes, they're getting it increasingly from apps and from social media as well. But many people still come around the television or watch it online or watch it on their phone and watch the nightly newscast. And to illustrate that to you, not just where we get our news from, but how important it is to so many people, I'm going to share with you an important resource, or maybe not so important to some of you, but it is when we talk about media literacy and why it's so important to understand not just how to understand the news in Hebrew, but also the flip side, where Israelis get their news, right? It's not just how they stay informed, it's what they're talking about on a regular basis. So if you want to be a part of Israeli society, you also need to know what people are talking about. What are they discussing? Because it's also covered in the news and vice versa. Okay, so let me share with you a important resource that also informs what we share with you here in terms of media outlets. Okay. As always, we'll share all these links with you. This is the website called Havada Hamidrug HaYisraelit, the Israeli Audience Research Board. Think of old school Nielsen in the United States, for those of you who know that word, right? This is how you gauge what people are watching on a regular basis. They have a great website. It's held up to the same international standards as other countries do, other developed countries in the world use. I highly recommend reading it over in English. I'm going to share it with you. And even when you go to the English page, it's going to direct you to the Hebrew reports. Basically, every day they put out a report of the previous day's top 20 most watched TV shows in the country. Okay, so I'm going to show you how this works. I'm generating it live right now. To view the reports, click here, right? And in Hebrew, it says Chipus lefi, search according to, Kahal Matara, the intended audience, right? The purpose of your audience. And you have four different options. You can look the entirety of Israeli mishkei bait. We've had that word before, meshek bait. We talked about that a few weeks ago when we talked about compound nouns. Meshek bait is a household, mishkei bait, the plural. So if you want to read see the entire Israeli population's viewership, you can click here. You can see specific details if you click on this one, and then you can see it broken down by Mishkei Bait Ba'Ochlusiya HaYehudit. You can just look at the Jewish population's viewership. Okay, but we're going to do everyone's. And then you can pick what day, starting from yesterday, right? That's the most recent report is yesterday's. You can also do it by week. So you can see weekly what the report is, but let's just pick yesterday. Yesterday was Sunday, beginning of the week. Let's see what were the 20 most viewed shows on TV. Okay, click here. Opens up a table, right? Hebrew tavla. If we go at the top of the header, right, it says dirug, rating, meaning what rating, what place did those shows come in? Shem HaTochnit, the name of the program. Arutz Mishtar, what channel it appeared on. Sha'at HaShidur HaMekorit, what hour did it originally broadcast on? Because this also tracks people watching on demand. Let's say they recorded it. Let's say they're watching it afterwards on an app or online, which we're going to do shortly. Tarikh, date, what day the original broadcast was on, right? Meshech Bitakot, how long the duration of the program was, right, in minutes. And then Shirei Tzvia B'Mishkei Bait, the proportion of viewership by household, right? So this is by percentage, as you see the percentage sign. So it can tell you percentage of the total amount of people watching TV that night, how many people watched that said program. And then in hard numbers, alfei mishkei bait, how many in the thousands of households watched that show. Okay, so let's just look at even the top 5, but we can also look at the top 10, like I said, top 20. This is yesterday, Sunday, all of Sunday. The first one is a reality show. It's a contest show called, in Hebrew, Hazamar B'Mechse Arba. This is a popular format around the world. This is the singer in the mask, right? A masked person comes on, sings a song. The panel has to guess who it is, right? It's a popular entertainment show that is on Keshet, Channel 12. The original broadcast was at 9:31 yesterday on the 20th of July. 96 minutes long. 14.3% of households watched it, corresponding to 323,000 households. Okay. The next one, the next most watched show, Ha'ach HaGadol, Big Brother 2025, everyone's favorite slash maybe not so favorite reality show. Yes, we have it here in Israel on Channel 13, 114 minutes, 14% of the viewership, or 315. The very next one is the first newscast we have of the night, of the day, excuse me. Of all of yesterday, the most watched news show is Chadashot 12, is Channel 12's 8 p.m. viewership, which started at 7:53, a few minutes before 8 o'clock, at 98 minutes, with 11.6% total viewership, corresponding to 262,000 households. Okay. The next one after that is their early newscast at 7 o'clock, which came in at 175, and so forth. You know how to read this now. Okay. Why am I saying this? First off, because sorry to be personal, some people have come at me saying that I am picking and choosing which news sources when we do this class we go after. Folks, I pick mainstream news sources that the vast majority of Israelis read. Case in point, we're going to look at Channel 12 right now. Second, you should know about consuming media in Israel. And media is not always just news, it's also content in the case of reality TV shows. That's important. For example, if you're employed in Israel, what are people talking about at the water cooler? It's not always going to be about work, and it's not always going to be in English. Knowing popular culture in Israel is an important part of being ingrained in a society, even if you don't consume it. You at least know what's going on. Okay. Just like we've talked about before, just because I'm teaching it to you doesn't mean you're actually going to use those words, but you should at least be aware of their existence. Case in point, what Israelis are watching on a given Sunday evening. Remember, Sunday's the beginning of the week here, not part of the weekend, right? You can also do that by week, that search. We'll send you this link. It's a great app to get an understanding what Israelis are consuming on TV, because Israelis, like many other societies, love TV. With that, we're going to do something a little different tonight. Okay. In the past, we've looked at news articles. We've looked at static things. We've sometimes even looked at videos of news articles. We've looked at a great resource, Hadshon, which is the Israeli Ministry of Education's Easy Hebrew News Digest of the previous day's headlines. We're going to do something different. I'm going to throw you in the deep end. We're going to look at yesterday's Chadshot 12. We're going to look at yesterday's most watched news nightly newscast, and we're just going to look at the headlines. We're going to do this differently in that there's not going to be a spreadsheet that I'm going to share with you now. I'm going to share it with you once you get a recording of this class. We're going to watch it together. It's 2 minutes of the headlines. And they're going to speak like the Israelis speak. It's going to be fast. It's going to be a lot of graphics. It's going to be coming right at you. Deep breaths. Okay, deep breaths. Try to focus on what words you recognize. Try to focus on the visuals, because remember, this is news on TV. It's as much about the words that are being expressed and the words in subtitles at the bottom as it is the graphics that you're seeing on the screen. Okay, they are as much a part of telling the story as the words coming out of the newscaster's mouth and the subtitles at the bottom. If this is overwhelming for you, great. Sit back, enjoy, and watch. This is what, again, whatever I just told you, percentage of Israelis were watching last night. This was 11.6% of Israeli households were watching the following thing. We're going to watch it. We're going to then go headline by headline and translate it together. Okay, but I want you to experience what Israelis 17 minutes ago were experiencing. We're going to look at yesterday's newscast. Now, again, this is what the vast majority, right? Well, we saw not the vast, but the majority of Israeli households were watching. So it is going to be mainstream news. Okay, that's in terms of what's being covered, in what order the headlines are presented. And yes, it's going to have some things that are not security related. They're not defense related. They're not religion related. They may just be straight up what some people would call fluff. Okay, but we're going to watch it together and we're going to translate as much as we can with the time we have together. Top of the hour, I'm going to answer some questions and tell you about next week's class topic. With that, let's start watching. Okay, we're going to watch it in full once, and then I'm going to rewind, and we're going to go headline by headline. Okay, so this is the website. I'm going to share it with you once it reloads. Give it a second. Sometimes it takes a little bit. There we go. Okay. Okay. This is Channel 12's online news digest. You can watch the news live. You don't need a TV to watch it. By the way, this website works around the world, and we'll share with you, obviously, this link. If I were to click it now, just like it says live in English, it will be the live broadcast, right? We're not going to watch the live broadcast. We're instead going to look at yesterday's headlines, and then we're going to translate them. So I click here, and you'll see on the left-hand side, it says Hamadua HaMelkazit Hamlea. We'll give you all those words, but that means the nightly, the main Melkazit, the central news edition, incomplete for complete Hamlea for the 20th of July. Okay. So if I click it, here we go.
הערב בחדשות ממתינים לתשובת חמאס. בכיר אמריקני אומר, ישראל עושה שמיניות באוויר כדי שיהיה הסכם. חמאס יהיה אשם אם לא יגיעו להבנות. מיד ברק רביד עם כל הפרטים מהמשא ומתן. פרסום ראשון, תוכנית הרמטכ"ל להשתלטות צה"ל על הרצועה והתגובה של נתניהו והשרים. ירון אברהם עם הפרטים. צה"ל מרחיב לראשונה מתחילת המלחמה את המערכה לדיר אל-בלח. משפחות החטופים מודאגות שיקיריהן מוחזקים באזור.
אני דואגת, כל מבצע צבאי שנכנס מסכן חטופים, את החיילים שלנו.
במקביל, שוב דיווחים על הרוגים מירי סמוך למרכז חלוקת מזון ברצועה. בצה"ל אומרים שהאירוע בבדיקה. ועדת השרים לא עוצרת, החליטה פה אחד להמליץ לממשלה על הדחת היועמ"שית בערב מיארה לבג"ץ, הליך בלתי חוקי בעליל. 3 מהחשודים בתקיפת חבר הכנסת איימן עודה שוחררו למעצר בית. השופט מתח ביקורת על התנהלות המשטרה.
זוהי המשטרה? או במקרה של הערבים משטרת בן גביר כך מתנהגת?
הפסקת האש בסוריה נכנסה לתוקף, מאמץ לשחרר את הנשים הדרוזיות שתועדו נחטפות מהכפרים שלהן. תחקיר, הטבות המימון בנדל"ן, כך הקבלנים עושים הכל כדי שלא להוריד מחירים. עמל דואק על הקבלנים שמנסים לעקוף את ההנחיות והחשש שרוכשים רבים לא יקבלו את הדירה שלהם.
אם הייתם מורידים את המחיר, לא היה צריך את הטבות המימון, אנשים היו יכולים פשוט לקנות דירה.
To think that there were people who had my back and loved every aspect of me, and for them to be silent, it was very painful.
יונתן ריגר בשיחה עם דברה מסינג ומייקל רפפורט על הסרט הדוקומנטרי שעוסק במחאות האנטישמיות בארצות הברית.
You know, to be honest, there have been a couple of things that have gone away.
Oh, look at these two. Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
אחרי התיעוד המביך בהופעה של קולדפליי, המנכ"ל שהתפטר, הגירושים היקרים והעקיצה הישראלית.
Okay, just over 2 minutes. That is the nightly newscast from yesterday. That's how it begins. Just like many main newscasts from around the world, it's fast, it's loud, it's very garish in terms of the colors and everything flashing at you, right? And this is, again, 11.6% of Israeli households watched it last night. The most watched news on average is Channel 12. It's the oldest commercial station in Israel. It's the second TV station in Israel after the public broadcaster. And what we're going to do now is look headline by headline. We're not going to have time to go through all the headlines here. I'm going to send you both this website in general and the link to yesterday's newscast, the one we're going to go through the headlines now, so you can follow along as well. But again, even if this is too much for you to take in at the same time, at least be able to say, okay, I don't agree with this, I don't get it, I don't understand it, but I can understand that this is what Israelis are watching. And so therefore, this is giving me insight into what they're talking about. And this is a class about Hebrew. And you just heard the news headlines in Hebrew like you would any other newscast around the world, but it happens to be here in Israel in Hebrew. So let's start looking at some of the headlines together.
הערב בחדשות ממתינים לתשובת חמאס.
Hey, הערב בחדשות. הערב, this evening, בחדשות, in the news, right? חדשות, news in the news. She's just reading, the woman who you hear, by the way, is Yonit Levy. She's one of the 2 central newscasters for the 8 o'clock news on Channel 12. She's reading the headlines that you see at the bottom. So for those of you who can follow along in the written Hebrew, you have a really good way of following along and hearing how fast she's talking, which is a typical speed for Israeli TV. Okay, so the bottom center of the screen is the headline that she's reading, the words in white. On the bottom right, you see it says Kotarot HaMedura, the headlines of the news edition and the date. On the left-hand side, that little white bar that indicates the photo credit of what you're seeing. Okay, and what does it say in Hebrew? Mamtinim lechuvat Hamas. Okay, waiting for Hamas's response. Mamtinim means to wait. So mamtinim, waiting. Lechuvat Hamas, la tshuva shel Hamas. Remember compound words we had the other week? This is a great example. Tshuvat Hamas. Instead of saying la tshuva shel Hamas, you can simply say in Hebrew, lechuvat Hamas, for Hamas's response. And then under it, after the colon, Bechir Amerikani Omer, a senior American official says,
חמאס, בכיר אמריקני אומר, ישראל עושה שמיניות באוויר כדי שיהיה הסכם.
Go back 1 second. Make sure that we get all of what Yunit said.
הערב בחדשות ממתינים לתשובת חמאס, בכיר אמריקני אומר, ישראל עושה שמיניות
ישראל עושה שמיניות באוויר כדי שיהיה הסכם. Okay, so what does this mean? Israel, עושה is doing, shminiyot ba'avir. Shminiyot ba'avir is an expression, but it's an understood one if you get the Hebrew. Shminiyot comes from the word shmona. Shmona is the number 8. Ba'avir means air. So this literally means is doing eighths or doing eighths in the air. What it's actually meaning is saying that Israel is doing figure eights in the air. Kedei sheyeh heskem, in order that there will be a heskem, an agreement. What the heck are eights in the air? Doing figure eights in the air is an aeronautical term. It's an aviation term. When you hover in order to make sure you have the precise destination or target, or you need to land in a certain way. So you hover in a figure eight motion, right, over the intended destination in order to get it correctly. So when the senior official, American official, Bachir Amerikani Omer, Israel osa shminiyot ba'avir, kedei sheyeh eskem. Israel is doing literally figure eights in the air so that there will be an agreement. That's what this headline says, meaning that Israel is doing everything possible so that there will be an agreement.
באוויר כדי שיהיה הסכם. חמאס יהיה אשם.
חמאס יהיה אשם אם לא יגיעו להבנות. Hamas will be יהיה אשם, guilty, אם לא יגיעו להבנות. Im with an aleph is if, לא יגיעו, if they will not reach havanot, understandings. Right? If we put this all together, Israel's doing everything it can to get to an agreement. Hamas will be guilty if they don't reach an agreement.
אם לא יגיעו להבנות, מיד ברק רביד.
מיד ברק רביד עם כל הפרטים מהמשא ומתן. Okay. So let's say you're watching this and you have no idea what's going on. Well, first off, Miad Barak Ravid. Barak Ravid is the name of a journalist. He's the Washington correspondent for Channel 12 News. Okay. If you don't know that, first off, you should know the name Barak is also a first name for men. It can also mean lightning, but that's also Miad Barak Ravid, right? Immediately is Miad, but it means we're soon going to hear from Barak Ravid, right? You're going to see this term a lot, by the way, in the news, where it'll say Miad, and then something about to happen. Miad Dover Tzahal, approaching imminently, or imminently about to happen, the spokesman for the IDF. In this case, the Washington correspondent, Barak Ravid, im kol hapratim me'hamasah u'matan. Im with an ayin means with. All the details, pratim are details, me'hamasah u'matan. Masah u'matan means negotiations. Okay, so Barak Ravid, their Washington correspondent, and this happens a lot on this website, with all the details of the negotiations. Let's go back to it. Don't worry, I won't make you watch it again and again like that. We're just going to skim ahead. Okay, so now you can follow along.
שהם אם לא יגיעו להבנות. מיד ברק רביד עם כל הפרטים מהמשא ומתן. פרסום ראשון.
פרסום ראשון, תוכנית הרמטכ"ל להשתלטות צה"ל על הרצועה. פרסום ראשון, very important. One of the many ways that the news agencies share breaking news, one of the headlines will say Pirsum Rishon. Pirsum means publishing, right? It literally means publishing. Lefarsem is to advertise or to publish, and Rishon is first, right? First to publish, or you can think of this as breaking news, or any of the other ways that news agencies around the world let you know that this is breaking news. It's fast developing. It's the first people to launch it, whether it's true or not. They often use this term to grab your attention, to say this is something important to follow. In this case, Tochnit HaRamatkal, Tochnit is a plan. Ramatkal is the IDF Chief of Staff. It's short for the IDF Chief of Staff. So the IDF Chiefs of Staff's plan, להשתלטות צה"ל על הרצועה, for Tsahal's control over the Gaza Strip, right? להשתלטות, the act of להשתלט, it's the verbal noun form of להשתלט, to gain control over the הרצועה. רצועה, understood, even though the word רצועה means strip, S-T-R-I-P, in this case, it's understood to mean רצועת עזה, the Gaza Strip.
תוכנית הרמטכ"ל להשתלטות צה"ל על הרצועה
והתגובה של נתניהו והשרים, ירון אברהם עם הפרטים. And התגובה and the response of Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, והשרים and the cabinet ministers, dash, ירון אברהם עם הפרטים. Again, we have a name, Yaron Avraham, one of their chief correspondents, עם הפרטים. That word again, with the details.
נתניהו והשרים, ירון אברהם עם הפרטים.
צה"ל מרחיב לראשונה מתחילת המלחמה את המערכה לדיר אל-בלח. צה"ל, the IDF, מרחיב. מרחיב comes from the word רחב, wide, so widens for the first time לראשונה מתחילת המלחמה, for the first time since the start of the war, מתחילת המלחמה. את המערכה, the military campaign, לדיר אל-בלח, to the Gazan city of Deir el-Balach.
לראשונה מתחילת המלחמה את המערכה לדיר אל-בלח. משפחות החטופים.
משפחות החטופים מודאגות שיקיריהן מוחזקים באזור. The families of those kidnapped, the משפחות החטופים, right? The families of the kidnapped, of the 50 remaining kidnapped Israelis in Gaza, מודאגות, are worried, שיקיריהן, שהיקירים שלהן, that their loved ones, meaning the 50 kidnapped, מוחזקים באזור, are being held באזור, in the area.
מודאגות שיקיריהן מוחזקים באזור.
אני דואגת.
אני דואגת, כל מבצע צבאי שנכנס מסכן חטופים. With quotes, right? It's no longer a headline, it's a quote from the woman who's speaking, italicized and in quotes, meaning it's direct quote from someone, in this case, the mother of Alon Ohel, the kidnapped Israeli that you see the picture in the back, right? And this is his mother. Ani doeget, I worry. Kol mivtza tzva'i, every military, operation, shenichnas, that enters, meaning into Gaza, misaken chatufim, endangers the kidnapped.
כל מבצע צבאי שנכנס מסכן חטופים, את החיילים של...
את החיילים שלנו, and our soldiers.
במקביל, שוב דיווחים על הרוגים.
במקביל, שוב דיווחים על הרוגים מירי סמוך למרכז חלוקת מזון ברצועה. במקביל, במקביל means in parallel, simply means in parallel. It could be lines, in this case, two stories happening at the same time. In parallel, shuv, again, divuchim, reports of, al, harugim, harugim, deaths. Miyeri, slicha, yeri means gunfire. So in parallel, more reports of, or recurring reports of deaths from gunfire. Samuch, nearby, למרכז חלוקת מזון ברצועה. The center, מרכז, חלוקת מזון, distribution, חלוקה of מזון, food, ברצועה, in the Gaza Strip. So put it all together, in parallel, more, again, reports of deaths from gunfire nearby the food distribution center in the Gaza Strip.
מירי סמוך למרכז חלוקת מזון ברצועה. בצה"ל אומרים שהאירוע בבדיקה.
בצה"ל אומרים שהאירוע בבדיקה. בצה"ל, in the IDF, אומרים, they're saying, שהאירוע, that the event, bivdika, is under investigation.
ועדת השרים לא עוצרת, החליטה פה...
ועדת השרים לא עוצרת, החליטה פה אחד. ועדת השרים, ועדה is a committee. Sarim are ministers. So the ministerial committees, the ministerial committee, lo otzeret, doesn't stop. La'atzor is to stop in place, has not stopped. Hichlita, it has decided, the committee has decided, pe echad. Pe echad literally translates to one mouth, but it means unanimously, right? With one voice, with one mouth. What did it agree on?
אחד להמליץ לממשלה...
להמליץ ממשלה על הדחת היועמ"שית בהרב מיארה, הבהירה, סליחה, להמליץ לממשלה על הדחת היועמ"שית. That's the line, right? What did they agree on? להמליץ, to recommend לממשלה, to the government, על הדחת היועמ"שית. To fire, להדיח is to remove or to fire, in this case, היועמ"שית. יועמ"שית stands for היועצת המשפטית, the attorney general. Okay? בהרב מיארה, which is the name, the last name of the attorney general, right? בהרב מיארה, הבהירה, clarified to בג"ץ. בג"ץ, בית גבוהה לצדק, בית משפט הגבוהה לצדק, the Supreme Court. Colon, so we know a quote is about to come.
על הדחת היועמ"שית בהרב מיארה לבג"ץ,
הליך בלתי חוקי בעליל, right? This is a halich, a process from the same root as lalechet or holech, to go, a process or a path, בלתי חוקי בעליל, completely בלתי חוקי, illegal. Okay, חוקי is legal, בלתי חוקי, illegal.
בלתי חוקי בעליל. שלושה מהחשודים בתקיפת חבר הכנסת איימן עודה שוחררו.
שלושה מהחשודים בתקיפת חבר הכנסת איימן עודה שוחררו למעצר בית. 3 of the חשודים, suspects, בתקיפת חבר כנסת איימן עודה, תקיפה is an attack, of the member of Knesset, חבר כנסת, member of Knesset Ayman Odeh, is his name, שוחררו, were released, למעצר בית, to house arrest.
ולמעצר בית, השופט מתח ביקורת.
השופט מתח ביקורת על התנהלות המשטרה. השופט, the judge, מתח ביקורת, leveled ביקורת, criticism, על התנהלות המשטרה, on the behavior of the משטרה, of the police.
על התנהלות המשטרה.
זוהי המשטרה?
This is חבר הכנסת איימן עודה, not the judge, and it's direct quote, both you see him speaking and it's quotes italicized. זוהי משטרה, is this the police? או במקרה, or in the chance של ערבים, in the chance of Arabs, as he is an Arab, משטרת בן גביר, the police of Security Minister Ben Gvir, National Security Minister Ben Gvir.
או במקרה של ערבים, משטרת בן גביר, כך מתנהגת.
כך מתנהגת. That's how they behave.
הפסקת האש בסוריה נכנסה...
הפסקת האש בסוריה נכנסה לתוקף, מאמץ לשחרר את הנשים הדרוזיות. הפסקת האש, the ceasefire בסוריה, in Syria, נכנסה לתוקף, literally enters into validity, happens again, meaning is now in force. Let's go back.
סוריה נכנסה לתוקף, מאמץ...
הפסקת האש בסוריה נכנסה לתוקף. The ceasefire in Syria is now in force. מאמץ, effort, לשחרר, to release, את הנשים הדרוזיות, the female, the Druze women, the Druze women, נשים הדרוזיות, the Druze women,
לשחרר את הנשים הדרוזיות
שתועדו נחטפות מהכפרים שלהן. שתועדו, that were documented, נחטפות, as being kidnapped, מהכפרים שלהן, from their villages.
נחטפות מהכפרים שלהם.
Tahkir, another one of these short words, either one word or two words together with a colon. You know it's about to be something a little bit more comprehensive, something they want you to pay attention to. Tahkir, investigation, colon. Hatavot hamimun benadlan. Funding, hatavot are favors. Mimun is funding, and nadlan is real estate. So you put this all together. Financial favors in or kickbacks is another way to think about this term phrasing in real estate. כך הקבלנים עושים הכל כדי שלא להוריד מחירים. כך, such is how, you're about to find out, הקבלנים, the contractors, עושים הכל, do everything possible, כדי, in order to, לא להוריד מחירים, in order to not lower prices.
עושים הכל כדי שלא להוריד מחירים.
איך היזמים יעקפו את זה במשק is the question, and now we see someone with a blurred face, so we know this is an investigation, right? It's an undercover investigation. Both we have a quote, we have a blurred face, we know something is going on, even if we can't understand it. איך היזמים יעקפו את זה במשק? How will the developers, right, override this or get around this in the economy, meaning how will they get around the different regulations that they're trying to get around? נחכה לראש היהודי שימציא משהו אחר. And the reply is, נחכה לראש היהודי שימציא משהו אחר. We'll wait for a ראש יהודי, literally a Jewish head, שימציא משהו אחר, that will invent something else, right? In Hebrew, the expression ראש יהודי meaning someone clever, someone thoughtful, who comes up with something creative, thoughtful, clever to solve something, in this case, to get around the issue with regulations and in favor of kickbacks for, excuse me, not kickbacks, as it said before, that contractors don't have to lower their prices for apartments. Amalia Duek, that's the name of the journalist you see on the right-hand side. Amalia Duek is a name. Amalia, first name. Duek is her last name. Al hakablanim sheminasim la'akof et haנחיות, on the contractors who tried to bypass the directives.
קבלנים שמנסים לעקוף את ההנחיות
והחשש שרוכשים רבים לא יקבלו את הדירה שלהם. And the fear, חשש, שרוכשים רבים, that many purchasers, meaning purchasers of apartments, לא יקבלו, will not receive, will not get את הדירה שלהם, their apartment.
שרוכשים רבים לא יקבלו את הדירה שלהם.
אם הייתם מורידים את
Direct quote, you see her speaking the words, but also it's a direct quote, again, quotes, quote marks, and italicized lettering. אם הייתם מורידים את המחיר, לא היה צריך את הטבות המימון. If you would lower the prices of the apartments, you wouldn't need the hatavot hamimun, all the different ways of supposedly helping people with funding. hatavot hamimun.
לא היה צריך את הטבות המימון, אנשים היו יכולים...
אנשים היו יכולים פשוט לקנות דירה. People would simply be able to buy an apartment. אנשים היו יכולים, people, היו יכולים, would be able to, פשוט, simply, לקנות דירה, buy an apartment.
פשוט לקנות דירה.
To think that there were people who had my back and loved every aspect of me, and for them to be silent, it was very painful.
יונתן ריגר בשיחה עם דברה.
Okay, I'm not going to do the English part. You can read that. You can listen to that, but you saw the Hebrew version of it. Yonatan Rieger besicha im Deborah Messing and Michael Rappaport. Yonatan Rieger, another one of the reporters, besicha im, in a conversation with Deborah Messing and Michael Rappaport.
מסינג ומייקל רפפורט על הסרט הדוקומנטרי.
על הסרט הדוקומנטרי שעוסק במחאות האנטישמיות בארצות הברית. On the documentary film that deals with the anti-Semitic protests בארצות הברית. That abbreviation at the bottom, we've talked about this before, stands for Artsot Habrit, the United States.
שעוסק במחאות האנטישמיות בארצות הברית.
You know, to be honest, there have been a couple of things that have gone away.
Oh, look at these two. Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
אחרי התיעוד המביך
ואחרי התיעוד המביך בהופעה של Coldplay, many of you have already seen this, but again, remember, this is the national newscast for the entire state of Israel, not the entire state of Israel. This is commercial news, so they're going to report everything, including things that you wouldn't necessarily think would be shown in the Jewish state, or let alone in Hebrew.
בהופעה של Coldplay, המנכ"ל שהתפטר, הגירושים היקרים והעקיצה הישראלית.
Okay, המנכ"ל שהתפטר, the CEO who resigned, הגירושים היקרים, the expensive divorce, והעקיצה הישראלית, and the Israeli literally sting, but sort of like lack of better terms, sassy comeback to what happened. And it's a performer in Israel, in this case, Ivri Lido, making a similar comment about a couple that are embracing themselves in one of his concerts. Okay, so we spent the most of this hour together going over 2 minutes of headlines, right? For what took us quite a while to go through and to translate, and we could have gone even deeper into it, right? Israelis just sit down and watch. Obviously, the more fluent you get, not even being totally fluent, you'll be able to watch and listen with the subtitles. And the good thing about Israeli newscasts on all the channels is that there are subtitles when it's recorded news. And certainly you saw the headlines. Now you know it, right? This is the equivalent, folks, when we go on news websites and we I tell you where are the headlines and where are the subheadlines and where's the body and what to look at and what you need to focus on. This did it for you, right? This is the nightly news edition, and it starts off with the headlines in the order in which they're going to be presented. So we start with the top news, and it goes down in the course of an hour and a half, actually, what you're going to hear, in addition to other stories that didn't make the headlines, but will be covered. Right? So now you can also make a decision. I can tune in a few minutes before 8 o'clock, watch the headlines, and decide if I need to watch this or not. I may not know all the words, but I can figure it out from the visuals. I can figure it out from some of the words I may know. Right? And at the very least, Jay just showed me what a vast majority of Israelis watching TV are watching at 8 o'clock at night, albeit that specific broadcast last night was 11.6%. Sometimes it's much higher, depending on if an event is happening. For example, obviously the percentages around October 7th were much higher of total number of households watching the news, right? But now I have insight, thanks to Jay, what Israelis are watching and how they're consuming news and what they're hearing, right? We didn't even talk about what's being shown and what's not being shown. I simply just showed you a snapshot from yesterday, 24 hours ago, what Israelis were consuming in the most popular newscast of yesterday. Okay, before I jump to your questions, first off, Toda Rabba, thank you all for joining. We're just over 300 participants. Still, talk about ratings. We are definitely the biggest regularly scheduled Hebrew class around the world. So Toda Rabba, thank you all for joining. Before I get into questions in the Q&A, next week's class is leading up to one of the most important days in Jewish history and in the Jewish calendar, whether you commemorate it or not. We are going to hear, I'm talking, of course, about the fast day of Tisha B'Av. And we're going to focus on that day by going through all the expressions we have in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, which I entitle Love, Hate, and Everything in Between. We've talked about expressions of love and affection. We're going to also talk about expressions of hate. How does that sound? Whether we're going to use those terms or not, you should know what they sound like, as well as how do we express how we're feeling on a regular basis. Emotional awareness is not just an important thing in your lives wherever you are in the world, but especially moving to a whole new country, even if it's a country you think you know, right? I bet if I asked how many of you have ever seen Israeli nightly news before, a lot of you would raise your hand and saying that you never have. Right? So just as there are a lot of new things to discover, so too how to express your emotions in Hebrew is going to be key, not just fitting into Israeli society, but being a well-adjusted new immigrant to Israel. That's next week's class, love, hate, and everything in between. I'm going to answer some questions now. How is Midrug's data collected? You can read about it on the website. We'll definitely send it to you. But from what I understand, they use both they use actual dials that people have in their homes, and they monitor whatever devices they have in addition to TVs, so also cell phones, computers, and so forth. But it's clearly said in Hebrew and in English on their website. And it's a government-appointed agency. Is each news channel known by its politics? That's a great question. Some of them have politics, some of them don't. The one that is specifically politically focused and says so is Channel 14, which is the newest of the network stations, and is decidedly pro-government and whatever we want to call right-wing in Israeli politics and society. They are firmly self-described as such. The others will claim that they are impartial. Many people have their critiques of them. Those news channels, those news panels on channels 11, 12, and 13 have reporters and news analysts and commentators that are known to have certain political beliefs. Once you watch enough TV, you know the personalities of these people and also their perspectives, what they support, what they don't, and that's also evident in how they report and what they report. So the only channel that has a specific outwardly stated agenda or ideology or viewpoint, whatever term you would prefer, is Channel 14. All the other ones will claim that they are impartial without a specific politic. Is there generally a difference in coverage between Shtemesle, which is commercial, versus Kan, which is semi-governmental? Kan is the equivalent, Channel 11 is the equivalent of public broadcasting, is the equivalent of PBS in the United States and other public broadcasters around the world. Because it's not commercial, it has a certain feel to it, whether people like that or not. Again, 11, 12, and 13 will say that they are non-political. Many people watching them will say they are one way or another, or specific journalists on those channels will say they're one way or another. I leave that up to you to decide. Would miyad be another way of saying up next? In that respect, yes, that's a great way of translating miyad. Miyad literally means immediately, but we can translate it in newspeak as up next. Someone is mistranslating the word tokef. Tokef means validation. We've talked about this word before. Remember, we've talked about this in public transportation. When you have to litakef something, the same root that gives us the verb litkof, to attack, also gives us the verb litakef, to validate. They aren't necessarily immediately understood as being connected or disconnected, but just know tokef and the expression nichneset latokef means goes into validation, meaning it goes into force. Okay. How would you say channel in Hebrew? Arutz. Ein, resh, vav, tzadid, sofi. Okay. One last question. I know it's highly subjective, but approximately how long would you say it took to be comfortably conversational in Hebrew? It's a great question. I've been learning Hebrew for a long time. I would say not until I've had actual application of it in Israeli society and being forced to use it did I feel comfortable. And all sorts of various life experiences I'm happy to talk about off camera. Not that they're private, but I just want to take up people's time. But until I actually had to use it and heard how Israelis use it rather than learning it from a distance and away from a textbook, did I feel comfortable and know how to use it appropriately. Okay. With that, is a news segment a keta chasifa? No, chasifa means expose. Is a news segment, we say katava. Hakatava shel, and then it'll be the name of the journalist writing it. Katava comes from the same root, by the way, as lichtov, to write, right? So news segment. The report by is the best way to think about katava, report. Okay. Hearing about you getting comfortable with Hebrew would be a great idea for a session. We'll include that in resources to further learn Hebrew at the end of our summer session in just a few weeks from now. I will happily add that to the agenda for that day. With that, again, toda rabah, thank you all for joining. This week's class, along with a link to that specific news broadcast, the website, and the ratings board will all be sent to you along with a recording of this, and I will write out the headlines along with their English translations and transliteration for you. Next week, like I said, love, hate, and everything in between. Until then, toda rabah, besorot tovot, may we only have good news, and lehitrot. See you all very soon.